Coming up today, China comes to a standstill as it holds a vast war anniversary military parade in the heart of Beijing. President Park Geun-hye and UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon are among the world leaders attending. With President Park's trip to China a clear indication of the strength of Seoul's ties with Beijing, we take a look at the shifting nature of old alliances in the region. South Korea's economic growth slows in the second quarter due to the fallout from the recent MERS outbreak and a number of external factors. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's midday on Thursday, September 3rd here in Seoul. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. China is commemorating the 70th anniversary of victory over Japan in World War II, with its grand victory celebrations being watched all around the globe. President Park Geun-hye, along with dozens of world leaders, have joined Chinese President Xi Jinping for the ceremony, the highlight of which being the massive military parade through Beijing's Tiananmen Square. For details, we connect to our Choi You-sun, who is travelling with President Park on her China trip. You-sun.
Mark, under a clear sky here in Beijing, tens of thousands of people have gathered to celebrate the end of World War II 70 years ago. Proceedings started about an hour ago at 10 a.m. Beijing time with the playing of the Chinese anthem, hoisting of the flag, and President Xi Jinping's speech. In his address, President Xi paid tribute to the Chinese people who fought hard and defeated Japan's aggressions in the war. Looking over Tiananmen Square, President Park is 2 seats from President Xi on his right side, next to Russian President Vladimir Putin. On her right is the Kazakh president. Former Chinese leaders, including President Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and former Premier Wen Jiabao are also there. The centerpiece of today's ceremonies is the military parade, a showcase of China's 12,000 troops, 200 aircraft, as well as tanks and missiles. Chinese state media reported that some 80% of the machinery are being unveiled for the first time. Considering the parade as both anti-Japanese and Beijing's way of flaunting its military prowess amid growing tensions in the region, U.S. President Barack Obama and most Western leaders have decided not to attend. And that is why President Park's decision to attend received a lot of media attention, as it's seen as Seoul's way of trying to take the lead in diplomacy in the region and balancing its relations with key ally Washington and major regional partner Beijing. Neither Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe nor North Korean leader Kim Jong-un are present. From the north, ruling party secretary Choi You-sun is attending the event. Mark?
Yeah, we're just looking at some images as you speak, You-sun. And if you could tell us a little bit more about today's Victory Day.
Sure. China calls the end of World War II anniversary the 70th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of resistance against Japanese aggression and the world's anti-fascist war. One day after Japan surrendered in the war in 1945, China designated September 3rd as Victory over Japan Day and has been publicly celebrating the occasion every 5 to 10 years. And last year, China officially declared the day as Victory Day, and it's the first time that the country has invited world leaders for the celebrations. After today's parade, President Park will join other VIP guests at a luncheon at the Great Hall of the People hosted by President Xi. The Chinese leader, who has expressed his gratitude of President Park's attendance by holding a separate summit and luncheon yesterday, is reported to have ordered his officials in charge of protocol to pay an extra attention to President Park. President Park is scheduled to travel to Shanghai later today to attend the ceremony there to mark the reopening of headquarters that belonged to Korea's provisional government during Japan's colonial rule. Before returning home Friday evening, she will meet with Korean residents in Shanghai, as well as business leaders from both Korea and China. This was Choi You-sun reporting on President Park's attendance at China's war victory ceremonies.
Well, thank you very much, You-sun, for that comprehensive report. Now, let's take a few moments to watch some of the highlights of this historic parade that's taking place in Beijing as we speak. China is showcasing its latest military wares to mark the 70th anniversary of Japan's defeat in World War II. As we heard from You-sun, dozens of world leaders are there to mark the occasion, including President Park and Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Before we play the video, though, it's worth taking note of the positioning of President Park in the group photo, which we will show you. She is next to Xi Jinping's wife, front and center. Putin is on the opposite side next to President Xi Jinping. What's interesting to note is the North Korean representative Choi You-sun is in the middle row on the far left. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, of course, declining China's invitation to come along. We must remember as well that China is North Korea's only major military ally. Well, let's take a look at the footage.
전국 동포们, 尊敬的
안녕하십니까.
您好，不要紧。
Well, remarkable scenes indeed on what appears to be an unusually clear early autumn day in Beijing. And the parade itself is set to finish very soon, but events and ceremonies will be held across China throughout the day, and we'll bring you all the latest updates in our later newscasts. Now, prior to today's parade, the leaders of South Korea and China issued a fresh warning to North Korea at their summit talks in Beijing on Wednesday. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports on the latest sign of the shifting alliances in the region.
At their sixth summit talks, the leaders of South Korea and China reaffirmed their warming ties.
Relations between South Korea and China are improving greatly through mutual trust, economic cooperation, and people-to-people exchanges.
In a sign of strained relations between Pyongyang and Beijing, Kim Jong-un did not attend China's Victory Day military parade, marking the first time a North Korean leader has been absent from the event. China has been North Korea's major economic and military lifeline for decades, but Kim has yet to meet with the Chinese leader. Officials in Seoul say Beijing has adopted South Korea's position for dealing with North Korea.
한중 양국 간의 전략적 협력과 한반도의 통일이 영내 평화를 달성하는 데 얼마나 중요한지도 잘 보여주었다고 생각합니다.
Despite claims that Seoul's cozy relations with Beijing could dampen its alliance with Washington, U.S. officials have expressed support, acknowledging China's position of influence over the North. The U.S. State Department on Wednesday welcomed the fresh warning issued to Pyongyang from Seoul and Beijing and reiterated its commitment to work with its partners and allies to implement previous agreements with the North. Experts say if South Korea succeeds in convincing China to shun the North, it would leave Pyongyang with nowhere left to go. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Some US experts on North Korea have been offering their assessments on last month's military standoff between the two Koreas that was diffused after marathon InterKorean talks proposed by Pyongyang. During a discussion organized by the US-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North in Washington on Wednesday, Joseph Bermudez noted that the North sent out roughly 70% of its submarines when it declared a semi-state of war during the standoff. He said such a move shows Pyongyang has produced concrete results in developing its submarine capabilities. Another expert at the discussion, Robert Carlin, said North Korea is believed to have used the latest standoff to get inter-Korean talks started in order to win the economic cooperation and investment necessary to rebuild its broken economy. A senior human rights investigator at the United Nations will visit South Korea next week to look into the human rights situation in North Korea following the recent InterKorean agreement. Marzuki Darusman, the US Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in North Korea, says he will start investigating and compiling new reports on Pyongyang's human rights violations upon his arrival in Seoul on Sunday. Now, during his 5-day stay, Darusman will discuss how the situation will be influenced after the two Koreas reached that landmark deal on improving inter-Korean relations. This will be his first visit since the UN set up a field office in Seoul in June to oversee North Korea's human rights violations. Inter-Korean trade is returning to levels seen before Seoul placed sanctions on Pyongyang for its sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan in March of 2010, when the South severed all trade between the two countries. According to the Seoul-based Korea Customs Service, data from them released on Thursday, cross-border trade reached just over $1.5 billion for the January to July period. That's a 22.4% increase from the same period last year. North Korea took $716 million worth of semi-finished products and goods and components, while the South imported $816 million worth of finished goods. The customs agency attributes the increase to the resumption of operations at the Kaesong Industrial Complex. Korea's main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is emphasizing the proclaiming of a second session of economic democratization by empowering smaller companies and reforming the family-owned conglomerates which dominate South Korea's economy. During Thursday's parliamentary address, the NPAD's floor leader, Lee Jong-gol, called on the ruling Saenuri Party's full support for economic diversification and, importantly, to support curbing the influence of chaebols, or the family-controlled conglomerates. Now, Lee said reforming the conglomerates should be the top priority during the National Assembly's regular session. Concerning North Korean matters, Lee suggested summit talks between President Park Geun-hye and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to be held before the end of the year. He also called for inter-Korean parliamentary talks to jointly commemorate the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence from Japan later this year. Now, Korea's economic scorecard for the second quarter is out, and it doesn't make for particularly pretty reading. GDP growth remains rooted in the 0% range, and gross national income declined for the first time in years. Now, the recent MERS outbreak didn't help matters, but even with that in the past, prospects for the coming months don't look that great either. Song Ji-sun reports.
Korea's gross national income, a key indicator of purchasing power, has dropped for the first time in 4.5 years. According to the Bank of Korea on Thursday, Korea's real GNI for the April to June period declined 0.1% from the first quarter. The nation's GDP growth over the same period was estimated at 0.3%, as earlier announced, staying in the 0% range for the fifth consecutive quarter. Exports edged up 0.3%, while imports gained a bit more at 0.9%. Central bank officials attribute the fall in GNI to a drop in interest and dividend income earned from residents overseas. That dropped below $1 billion from $5 billion in the first quarter, as most domestic firms received their foreign dividends in the first 3 months of the year. Spending on retail, wholesales, food and beverage products dropped 0.7%, due to fears about the MERS outbreak that hit the nation in the second quarter. Domestic consumption fell 0.2%, but government spending rose 0.8%. Despite government efforts to boost domestic sentiment, experts say it's highly unlikely we'll see a rebound in the second half. A prolonged period of low growth is projected due to external factors like the slowing Chinese economy. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, staying with economic news, and Korea's foreign exchange reserves fell for a second consecutive month in August on the strength of the US dollar against some other currencies. The Bank of Korea says the nation's reserves stood at $367.9 billion at the end of last month. That's down nearly $3 billion from July. The central bank attributes the slump to a fall in the dollar-denominated value of some non-dollar currencies, such as the British pound and the Australian dollar. In August, the pound fell 1.2% against the greenback. The Australian dollar slipped just over 2%. Korea remained the world's sixth largest holder of foreign reserves as of the end of July. China topped the list, followed by Japan and Saudi Arabia. The global economic slowdown is weighing heavily on the manufacturing sector. Growth remains lackluster due to the sluggish recovery both in advanced economies and even a further slowdown in emerging nations. Son Jong-in has more.
The Global Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, produced by JP Morgan and Markit, sank to its lowest reading in over 2 years at 50.7. A figure above 50 indicates expansion of manufacturing activity, while a figure below 50 signals contraction. Although global factory activity has expanded for 33 consecutive months, the reading was the lowest since May 2013, when the PMI registered 50.1. Korea was among the nations that contributed to dragging down the global index, recording one of the lowest figures at 47.9. Among 25 countries surveyed for the index, only crisis-hit Greece, China, and countries closely linked with China such as Brazil, Taiwan, and Malaysia posted a lower figure. Experts blame the economic uncertainties in the world's two largest economies. China's factory sector shrank at its fastest pace, with the index dropping to 47.3, the lowest since March 2009. Growth in the U.S. manufacturing sector also slowed to its weakest in almost 2 years in August, with the PMI falling to 53. Director at JP Morgan, David Hensley, said the August survey suggests that the conditions in the global manufacturing sector continue to struggle under global economic uncertainties, with growth staying stubbornly below its long-run trend. Son Jong-in, Arirang News.
Well, those are the news stories we're following on this Thursday afternoon in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome. Have a great day, and thank you as always for tuning in. We do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.